This video is a rough overview of strategies we all can use to lose body fat. And where I want to start with this conversation is that we all know how to quickly drop weight. Every single one of us who's ever tried to drop weight knows that if we cut our calories and we do that for a period of time, that our bodies will get smaller. And the struggle that people face is that that solution only does tend to work short term and does not tend to lead to a lifestyle of being lean and healthy. So while calorie deficits are important in our quest to become leaner and more muscular, they can't be the only place we look for solutions. Otherwise, all of us would have already accomplished it in general in the first place. So the second thing I want to say is it's very common in this culture still, 2022, people to believe that doing a bunch of cardiovascular exercise burns body fat, and doing strength training is good for building muscle. So the average person who wants and has a goal, is sort of hyper-focused on dropping body fat, they will tend to drop their strength training in favor of activities that involve a lot of movement, a lot of sweating, a lot of breathing for a prolonged period of time. There is a partial truth to that story, that narrative, but it's important that you understand the whole picture. Where that idea of cardio burns body fat comes from is when we look at the research around the fuel sources for activities. What we know is that things that involve low intensity, long duration movement tend to utilize body fat as its fuel source. And so, for example, if I go on a 30-minute walk, it's low intensity, it's long duration, and primarily what my body used for energy during that process was breaking down fat into triglycerides into ATP for walking. Conversely, if I go perform snatches and deadlifts, heavy squats, those things only happen for a few seconds of time, and because of that, they favor fast energy production from the storage of sugar in our bodies. So our muscles, our liver, turn that into glucose for those quick bouts of high intensity exercise. Where people get confused is that just because long duration cardiovascular exercise uses body fat in the moment for fuel source, it does not mean necessarily that utilizing that body fat fuel source leads to your own body dropping pounds of body fat. The reason largely being is that the amount of fat you have on your body is largely controlled by your hormonal system all throughout the day, week in, week out, month in, month out. So yeah, you can go burn some body fat doing your boot camp class, but if you generally leave the rest of your lifestyle about the same, that means your own hormonal system is signaling the layering of body fat onto your body. And so while in a single moment you burn some body fat, it was so minuscule compared to the signals that are telling your body to replace it, to put it back where we got it from. So overall, the long-term strategy for dropping body fat has got to be around building of muscle. And in order to build the muscle, we need to do strength stuff, heavy things, high intensity, short duration activities. Walking isn't going to cut it. Long distance biking isn't going to cut it. Swimming's not going to cut it. We have to change how we're thinking. Again, burning body fat in the moment is not the same as dropping pounds of body weight or body fat off of your body over a long period of time and keeping it off. It's just not the same. Otherwise, again, we'd all will have done it because we would have just done a bunch of cardio, dropped our calories and our food intake, and the rest of our life is golden. But it rarely works that way. So we can also kind of look at history. There's plenty of case studies in both research and sociology where we look at people, say, in detention centers, in prisoner of war camps, or during the Holocaust, or conscientious objectors volunteering for starvation studies during World War II. We have all these cases where large populations were essentially starved of food, and yet most of them maintained their fatness and dropped their muscle over the course of that starvation, rather than the opposite. So starving ourselves, dropping calories low, doesn't necessarily mean that the fat storage on our body is going to drastically change. So these are just things that we have to consider in our understanding of the story of how we got where we are. We all have the bodies that we have earned through our lifetime, with the exception of being born with a disorder. Let's all be just honest with ourselves. How we look, how we feel, how we move and perform is all a direct result of the accumulation of choices we've made over our lives, particularly the last several years of our lives. It's also, let's talk about differences in body fat. So we're all taught to be afraid of what's called white fat, yellow fat. You know, it's underneath of our skin, on top of our muscles. It's also can surround our organs. And that kind of fat in our body is not the only kind that exists. And so the white, yellow fat that we're all taught to be afraid of is generally an energy surplus storage system, but it serves a completely separate function as well. It's important for us to grasp if we want to drop it. The other function is toxin detoxification. So all of us, air, food, water, soil, there's all this bad stuff coming at our bodies and in our bodies, and none of us can avoid it. It's impossible. We can decrease it, but it's not avoidable at all living on Earth. And so there's bad stuff coming into us, but we have systems in our body that we call detoxification systems that push that bad stuff gradually back out of us. Mainly we do it through breathing, sweating, peeing, and pooping. And so we're all filled with water, all right, and we're over 90% water. And if bad stuff's coming into us faster than we can get bad stuff out of us, the body's one of the body's solutions to that energy problem is it traps bad stuff in a fat molecule until it can be processed outside of us. So part of us dropping body fat over a long period of time and keeping it off is learning how to minimize the bad stuff coming in, but it also is learning how to maximize the detoxification systems, essentially training them to get bad stuff out faster than it used to. And then that will essentially liberate a lot of those toxins out of our body, which means the fat can be used less often for that sort of prison of those toxins, and it can leave us too. And so creating an energy deficit is important. Building muscle mass is important, but so is improving the rate of bad stuff getting out of us. That is a side of, that is sort of a tangent as to why cardio, for example, can help drop body fat over a long period of time. And if we just do weight training alone, it may not be as effective, because the weight training builds the muscle, but the cardiovascular system is pushing, it's being trained to push the other stuff out of us. So not only is it using fat in the moment for the activity, but it's actually training our detoxification systems to become better at their job. So combination in the world of exercise of strength training and cardiovascular training put together is always the most effective system in terms of just movement selection, all right, for dropping body fat. So we also have something called brown fat in our bodies, and that is a metabolically active fat. Brown fat is found in much higher percentages in infants. And adults, as we age, have less and less, but we can train our bodies to create more and more. Brown fat burns a lot of calories. Brown fat also regulates a lot of our hormones. and is a major player in how lean a person stays in general for a lifetime. So anything we can do to build up brown fat in our bodies, but drop the white yellow fat through exercise, calorie deficits, and detoxification assistance, then this combination ends up being very powerful over time. So one of the things that builds the storage of brown fat in our bodies is cold therapy. And the research says we only need about 11 minutes a week. So that means all we really need to do is get in cold showers or cold baths. Cold is defined as somewhere in the 50 to 60 degree range, so it doesn't even have to be near freezing. And we invest time in that. We can start that process even by getting a cold bowl of water that's in that sort of 50 to 60 degree temperature range. We can dip our faces in it and hold it there for a couple minutes, obviously coming up for air. But the systems that signal the production of brown fat are in part related to the vagus nerve, and that is getting information from the face being in the bowl. So for those of us who are a little bit weary of going into a cold plunge for a few minutes of our day, we can start building a level of tolerance by putting our face in it and getting some of the benefits without submerging our entire body. Brown fat is good fat. We want more of it, okay? Since you are largely water, it is important to try and put good quality water in you and make sure it stays in you. So without getting in a long tangent, generally speaking, our tap water is crap, and we have to process it to make it less crappy. You can ask me about that stuff later, but generally get quality water that has been filtered of the bad stuff from it, and then put electrolytes, minerals back in it. I use lemon and sea salt. You can buy products like Element, which are pre-packaged electrolyte packets that you just dissolve in the water that you consume. Bottom line is you need to get mineral salts into the water and into your food so that the water you do consume actually tends to stay inside of you and be used for what we need the water to be used for. If we just drink a bunch of water and we avoid the salts, we tend to sweat, exhale, pee more of it out than is ideal. So the more water you hold inside of yourselves, the better our biochemistry is, and which means all the processes that are dropping body fat over a long period of time become more efficient. So part of dropping body fat permanently is truly just becoming better hydrated and staying that way as part of our lifestyle. The last thing I'll touch on, actually one other thing. So training our detoxification pathways to build, to improve body fat loss comes from just doing anything related to sweating. So that means you could go into saunas, you could do hot baths, you can go do your cardio. Anything you're doing that pushes the sweat system to become better and heat adapted, just like it's a good idea to become cold adapted for the brown fat. Anything that allows you to become better heat adapted is going to mean your detoxification systems is sort of processing things faster, getting it out of the body faster, and that'll be of great assistance in dropping the yellow, white fat that we're trying to drop from our bodies. So last thing I wanted to mention was our chaotic lifestyles. If we personally experience our lives as very chaotic and stressful, and it doesn't matter if somebody else sees it as that, all right? If our emotional experience is constant stress, chaos, and lots of big swings in emotions, that hormonal environment, living that day to day, keeps us in sugar burning mode. It's a lot like doing high intensity, short duration exercise. We burn the crap out of our sugars and tend not to access our body fat storage for fuel. And so part of dropping body fat permanently is assessing our stress in our lives and how we think and feel in our minds so that we can create a lifestyle that feels more calming and joyful so that we have the parasympathetic system generally operating along long periods of our day, which is a direct link to burning body fat in the process. Parasympathetic system in a long walk is also the reason why that walk is burning body fat. Yet if we go sprint for 20 seconds, that is a sympathetic hormonal response, a fight or flight response, and forces sugar burning. So for the same reason that parasympathetic based exercise tends to favor body fat as fuel, parasympathetic lifestyles tend to favor lean bodies and more muscular bodies. So these are things to consider in your journey dropping body fat that aren't just stopping at calorie deficits and cardiovascular exercise. I've provided a lot of tools that you can gradually incorporate into your own personal lives to the extent that you're willing, that will gradually change how lean you are for the rest of your life. If you ignore it and you decide, hey, I'm just going to do the quick fix and starve myself and do a bunch of exercise really every single day, long periods a day, you're going to dig yourself into a hole and be one of the millions of people every single day that constantly yo-yo back and forth with their body weight.